Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Investing Basics. This week's edition was inspired by a question that was asked by one of our members. And she says, happy Sunday in this particular day when she wrote this. I want to add the S&P 500 ETF to my portfolio. I believe that's what she meant. After reading one of my recent newsletters, she mentioned that she noticed that there's an expense ratio on the ETF and she wants to know if this is normal. Um, First and foremost, this is not why this question caught my eye, but I will answer this question quickly. Yes, it is normal for an ETF to have an expense ratio. Expense ratios are across the board typical with mutual funds, index funds, and ETFs. So any investing fund that you are looking at will likely have an expense ratio. There are some companies like Fidelity, for example, and others that do offer funds with no fees. But that's an exception. For the most part, you are going to find that most funds have expense ratios. What you want to look at, what you want to be careful with is how high that fee is. But that's a topic for another day. I do want to elaborate further on this question because what caught my eye is that she's specifically asking about this particular fund, the Vanguard S&P 500 Growth ETF. So notice the word growth in the name of the fund. One of the reasons why investing can be so overwhelming and so confusing for a lot of people, specifically beginners, is because there are so many options for the same exact thing. There's so different versions of the same exact thing. And if you don't know what to look at, what to analyze, you are going to get confused. But don't worry, that's what I'm here for. So I want to elaborate more on this. So before we get started, this question actually reminded me of this quote by Peter Lynch. Know what you own and know why you own it. When you're building an investing for portfolio, you want to understand why you're buying it, and you want to make sure that you're buying the things that you want to get to achieve your investing goals. So, like I said, there are multiple versions of the S&P 500. First and foremost, there's a lot of companies that have their own version, as I've explained in prior lessons. If you missed any of those lessons, let me know and I'm happy to share them again. In this particular case, we're focusing on Vanguard that has, again, this looks like they're identical versions, but it's not the same thing. Notice how one of them, the VOO, is the traditional standard S&P 500 ETF, and then they have the growth version of that fund, okay? And I want to show you what the difference is. The first thing that you need to do when you're confused about what a fund is investing in, go straight to the summary page, the objective page. In this case, they call it product summary. Depending on the company that you are looking at, they're going to call it different things. But you just go to the place where they have the description of what the fund is investing in so that you have a good idea of where your money is going to be going. Here they're showing you in the traditional description, they're just telling you plain and simple, this fund invests in stocks in the S&P 500 index, which is the traditional one that invests in the 500 largest and most important companies in the US stock market. The growth fund also invests in the S&P 500 in those same exact companies, but the key difference here is how the money is allocated into each of those companies. In the case of the growth version, they're allocating the bulk of the money that goes into the fund into companies that they consider to be growth stocks, meaning companies that have a higher prospect of making more money over time. They're in a more aggressive phase when it comes to their business cycle. So they're concentrating a bulk of the money that goes into the fund into those specific companies. Meanwhile, in the traditional S&P 500 ETF, they're using the standard allocation method, which that's a whole other explanation for another day, to allocate the money that goes into the fund. And I'm going to show you they show you all of this on the website, specifically within each of the funds information page. So for the growth ETF, just to give you a quick example, in terms of Apple, 12% of the money that goes into this fund goes into Apple stock, or it's being allocated towards Apple stock. So in this particular scenario, 12% of the money that's in the fund right now is in Apple. Meanwhile, in the traditional ETF, only 6% of the money that's in the fund is towards Apple. So literally half. And same goes for Microsoft. They have a higher percentage allocation. NVIDIA, they have a higher percentage allocation in comparison to the traditional version. And there's not to say that one is better than the other. I just want you to understand that you have to know what you're looking at and what you're buying before you buy it. So if you are looking for a fund that is more aggressive per se in the way you invest the money, and when you go that route, typically you expect more volatility with the hope that your investment is going to grow or do better than the average. So this is part of the goal of this particular growth fund, to do better than the traditional one, because there's investing a bulk of the money in the growth stocks. And just quickly with the expense ratios, I just want to make a quick note. Both of the expense ratio for each one is super low, so this is irrelevant. I wouldn't even focus on this. Vanguard, Fidelity, BlackRock, some other companies are have a reputation for offering high quality funds at low expense ratios, but you always want to look at the specific funds because it's going to vary depending on how specialized the fund is. The fees might be higher, but in this particular case for Vanguard, both fees are super low, so I wouldn't even worry about that. We want to focus on, how the money is being invested. So just to give you an idea, over the past 5 years, this is the 5-year return on investment. This particular fund, the VOOG, has performed slightly better than the traditional one. So VOO, about 95% return on investment over the past 5 years. VOOG, about 110, 11%. Over the past 10 years, the difference is more notable. So VOOG's return is about 247%. Meanwhile, the traditional S&P 500 is about 180. And that makes sense, right? Like I said before, typically growth companies do offer a better returns over time. It's never a guaranteed, but typically, historically, that's how it's been, with a higher percentage of also volatility and risk. So that's the trade-off. In this particular case, VOOG over the years has been a better investment than the traditional S&P 500 fund, but they're both excellent, but they're both great investments. It's just that one has a way of investing that's different than the other. So that's what I want to explain. And again, historical track record is not guaranteed that it's going to be the same in the future. This is just how it's done historically. So I hope this clarifies this question. Please let me know, and also let me know if you have any questions about anything I talked about in this quick video. This is just, like I said, basics. So obviously, if you want me to elaborate more on any other topics, please let me know, and you know where to find me. Have an amazing day.